Well, folks, welcome in to another edition of the LCFP. That's the Laners College Football Pod. If you're watching, you can already see we've got a full squad today. We've got Eli, Howie, and Reagan. How we doing, fellas? Welcome to the pod.
Good to be back, man. I know we took a little break after the season, but really glad to be back.
Happy to be here, Laner. Thanks for having us.
It's always a pleasure to be on. Happy to get into it.
Let's go. Well, this is officially our last episode of the 2025 season. And from here forward, we'll be doing some off-season episodes. If you missed our last one, we had Eli, Howie, and myself on, and Howie kind of recapped the IU National Championship season and his journey being an Indiana Hoosier fan throughout his entire life. So this is going to be a fun episode. We're going to talk major storylines and fun moments from 2025. But as always, we are brought to you by our good friends at Duck Buck. Howie and Reagan are rocking, I believe, the same lid there with the green bill, the Duck Buck logo, the rope hat. I've got my own here. I've got the Duck Buck hoodie as well. Eli, we're gonna get you some Duck Buck gear soon, but you're rocking your Ohio State gear, I see.
Yes. Got the Buckeyes like basketball, baseball jersey combo. It's pretty sick.
I love it. Well, for those of you watching and listening, we appreciate all the support you've been giving to Duck Buck. We've been their number one used code this season. So keep hammering that code LCFP for 15% off at duckbuckco.com. Without further ado, Reagan, since you didn't join us last episode, we'll start with you. What's one of your favorite things from this past season?
I want to start with how Ole Miss finished the year. Trinidad Chambliss in that team, man, just so massively, massively impressive with all the distractions going on to do what they did in the playoffs to where, man, Trinidad Chambliss, he showed up and showed out. I was watching these games with a lot of very casual fans. And when I was telling people that he's probably going to come back to college next year, everybody kept asking why. He's clearly good enough to go to the NFL and to be what they think is a pretty good draft pick. And so, man, Ole Miss, very impressive how they ended the year, how they shut out all those distractions. Obviously, they took care in the first round of Tulane, then played an all-time second game against Georgia. So much fun. And then man, when they got the ball back with like 30, 40 seconds against Miami, I'm not going to lie, they were so impressive that I was sitting there like, oh, that's too much time. And it almost was too much time. So just massively impressive Ole Miss, just shutting out the noise and, showing up and showing out in the playoffs.
You stole mine, man. Trinidad Chambliss was where I was going to go, Reagan. So major
I,
props to you.
and Trinidad's your guy. You were on him first, so I do feel a little bad taking your guy and your story there, but that's just it was massively impressive, and I assume how obviously how he's going to talk about Indiana. So those were really the two stories to me, unless you wanted to go Miami with Cristobal and that team. So maybe you want to go there.
Absolutely. I just thought Trinidad Chambliss was like the most electric player in college football this year. Obviously, like only started about three-fourths of their games, so wasn't going to be in the Heisman contention. And Fernando Mendoza, well deserved for the award. But I just thought,
Yeah.
especially those last two games, man, the Sugar Bowl and their game against Miami, man, he really showed out against two extremely tough defenses with a coaching change, play calling changes, all that kind of stuff in the middle of the year. Trinidad Chambliss, definitely one of the best stories of the season. You
And
teed
and
up
they
Howie, Reagan. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, just to put a final thought is those last two games, and I apologize for the background noise. Those last two games, watching Chambliss run around, you know what it reminded me of was vintage Joe Burrow running away from Georgia's defenders in that 2019 SEC championship game and just doing things that should only be done in Madden, throwing off his back foot, throwing dimes, man. Just reminded me of that.
Absolutely. I even thought of Johnny Manziel and just his ability to use his arm and his legs. Phenomenal stuff. You teed up Howie. Howie, I know we did a full episode on IU, but I mean, there were so many incredible players on the Hoosiers. I don't know if you wanted to share one of your favorites. I mean, late in the year, Charlie Becker was a guy that came up for me that I just think he's going to have a phenomenal NFL career. But you take this wherever you want, Howie, for one of your Hoosiers.
Yeah, I think it's hard to put a thumb on which player to pick, right, from this team. There's so many that stick out. Elijah Surratt had the huge touchdown catch against Iowa when it looked like IU was gonna kind of end their magical season there in Kinnick. I think of D'Angelo Pons having the block punt um, against Illinois when Illinois is supposed to be that test for IU, and they beat them 63-10. And then again, Surratt with a beautiful back shoulder catch, Mendoza with a beautiful back shoulder throw against Oregon to kind of seal that thing there in Eugene. Man, it's hard the Omar Cooper catch against Penn State when it looked like IU's magical season was going to end there. Um, just that Heisman drive for Mendoza there at Penn State, and that's kind of really where Charlie Becker like stood out in that game. Surratt goes down, I believe, in that game, or is just dealing with an injury, and Charlie Becker kind of blossomed into the guy. And so it kind of springboarded that team to having now 3 perennial targets for Mendoza, as well as a tight end and a running back and a couple of running backs out of the backfield. I again, the Ohio State beating Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game to kind of clear that barrier, and then just the dismantling of Alabama and Oregon in the Rose Bowl and the Peach Bowl, respectively. Like those, just the couple moments in the game that turned the momentum. But I think one of the biggest takeaways, like Aiden Fisher's a dog, Omar Cooper Jr. is a dog. Like there's I could say 100 players on those teams, but I think to wrap up and to encapsulate all of IU into one, I guess, MVP person, I would give it to the fans. Like being at that Illinois game, it was like the red out. It was just incredible. The amount of fans, just there's fans at Penn State that made noise there at the end. There's fans that traveled out to Eugene. The game at Purdue this year was a majority IU squad. Ohio State fans flock to Indy for that Big Ten championship game because they're always in it. Well, IU had a great showing there in Indy as well. And then being at the Rose Bowl for me and seeing 90% IU fans, 85% IU fans, in Pasadena was wild to me. And then to follow it up next week in Atlanta with a majority IU crowd. But then, of course, the icing on the cake is just getting down to Miami, and then, which is a home game. You're playing the home team, and IU fans just made a way. And for like, they were like, we're getting there. And so the amount of IU fans that were there, the amount of red, the amount of noise they created there at Hard Rock. So basically the IU season wrapped up, and then the fan support and all of that would be the highlight for me.
Oh, the travel for those fans is just unbelievable. They were all over the country. You were one of the fans at the Rose Bowl, but man, to take over Miami and just everything, all of the things that you mentioned, getting the Big Ten championship, you were able to throw some shots at Eli and myself, the Buckeyes and Crimson Tide. Like how you snuck those in there, Howie. I got to say, the Omar Cooper catch was incredible at Penn State. You brought up a few other things, though, and I want to jump over to Eli since you did bring up Ohio State. But I'm going to poke one additional thing that I love from this season. The regionality of the Big Ten championship and the SEC championship was phenomenal this year. Indianapolis being the host city and Indiana being an hour down the road and Ohio State being the border state, Georgia playing in Atlanta for the SEC championship and Alabama being right there. Like, I know that game was not as good, but man, the regionalness of those games, it's not even a word, but I loved that piece of this season. Eli, what was something that stuck out to you from 2025?
It was a long 2,191 days that we went without beating that team up north. And as a guy who in my family, my uncle, diehard Michigan fan, my cousins, diehard Michigan fans, my younger brothers, diehard Michigan fans, and some of my best friends at school, because I live in Northwest Ohio. We're closer to Ann Arbor than we are in Columbus. Biggest Michigan fans on the planet, talking nonstop. We went in there, we took care of business, and we did it in style. That is my moment of the year. Everybody can be quiet now about Ryan Day. Can't win the big one. He just won all the biggest games. Oh, the monkey off the back in that moment was so, so special because every year you have three goals when you get to Ohio State. You beat the team up north, you go to Indianapolis, and you go to the national championship. Obviously, we didn't complete those last two, winning the Big Ten and winning the Natty, but beating beating that team is it's just it's hard to put into words. It
So,
really is.
Eli, you mind if I hop in and ask you a question? Because Laner and Howie know I've got a really good friend at work, huge OSU fan. And she tells me her husband, bigger fan than she is, and she gives me all the inside for your fan base. Would you take this year's season or last year's season? How much more does winning that Michigan game mean? Because the lady from work, her husband said last year was great for what it was, but because they didn't beat Michigan, he said that it felt hollow almost. What are your thoughts?
I think for me, this was the first time that I like consciously got to see them get the job done. I was about 8 years old when they won the national championship in 2014. So I will take last year's season over this year's because of the way the playoff run went, first of all. But I think your goal is to win the national championship first and foremost. Like, that's your job. So for me, I'm probably going last year, but this year was just it's not too far behind. It was just as fun.
You know what's great though about even asking that question, Reagan, is it just shows how great rivalries are in college football and the passion, Eli, with which you shared about how many days you knew it was from their last win and how important that win was. That's part of the beauty of college football right
And
there.
it's not just the OSU fan base, by the
Yeah.
way. From the Georgia perspective, yeah, we didn't accomplish what we could have this year potentially. But doing what we did to Alabama was so cathartic and so monkey off your back, Eli, that even going into next year, overall the fan base is still elated that we accomplished what we did. So yeah, just a nice parallel.
And
Wanted to
also,
sneak in another shot there, Reagan. Appreciate it.
Not Lantern, not intentional, brother. You know
No,
that.
I love it. I love it. Go ahead, Hal.
same for IU. I know Purdue football program is not very good, but to beat them the last 2 years, 122-3 combined, just brings so much joy to my heart. Like, just so much joy. And like the amount of misery that Purdue fans are in right now with IU football winning the Natty, and then obviously not beating IU in the football season, but then to turn around and Purdue basketball, which they go, all Purdue fans all year have said, we'll just wait till basketball season. Well, this past week, IU basketball did beat Purdue. And so just, it's just a great time right now. It's an awesome time. And so, the rivalry, like you said, it's the
Laner, you mind if I throw one more out for the group? Because I think that everybody will take joy in this. Something that stood out this year is how down bad Notre Dame and Notre Dame fans truly are, where, going into the year, they're this big bad. They rip off two straight losses. Then they rip off 10 wins in a row against a lot of suspect competition at best. Feeling like in the betting market, they were minus 300 to make the football playoff. Then for one of their biggest rivals in Miami to get in over them. And then Miami and Alabama justify being in the playoffs with those first round wins. Miami, they're one of their arch rivals going all the way to the Natty, playing against their little brother. And then their little brother becomes big brother and owns the state of Indiana right now. I find a lot of comedy in the fact that nobody's down bad worse than Notre Dame and Notre Dame fans right now. They had to bring Marcus Freeman out for color commentary before the game. They were down so bad.
And one thing I do want to say is, again, Northwest Ohio, Northeast Indiana, a lot of Notre Dame fans in the area too. I think that taste that they've got in their mouths right now, like they're ready to spot the ball and get it going next year. So it just makes things even more exciting as you keep building. And then also, I wanted to hit on, I was actually at the IU Purdue game football this year. I got the opportunity to take my cousin who's an IU fan to it. My other cousin goes to Purdue, so another, family affair. But sitting in the IU section of the stadium, which was most of it, like they're really passionate fans, and it's just so cool to see.
There was a lot of enthusiasm on this side of the screen when you shared that kind of Notre Dame rundown, Reagan. Did you sense that? Any thoughts there, Howie?
Oh, oh, I saw it. I had to compose myself while speaking.
Yeah, there's no love lost for the team on the northwest side of the state, northwest corner of the state. I just, I mean, Notre Dame is plucked. Notre Dame football's plucked a couple of IU fans, IU football fans, like true IU football fans, here of recent years. And everybody we call them reversible jacket fans. The fall side of the jacket is Notre Dame football, and then as soon as winter hits, you unzip the jacket, you reverse it out, and it says Indiana basketball on the back of it. So um, it's nice to see some of those fans find their way back home to Bloomington, and really just because they didn't beat the two best teams on their schedule this year, and then the rest of their schedule was about as soft as a baby's bottom. So, um, I just then their next year's schedule looks just as soft. So can't wait for them to hopefully lose to I believe Miami. Yeah, I want them to lose to Miami next year at
Maybe
home,
BYU too, hopefully.
and hopefully BYU, and be in the same position. And then I'd love nothing more than for IU to be in the national championship next year, and Marcus Freeman to be on the desk at College Game Day and taking shots. I would nothing would bring me more joy.
Yeah, this is how down bad they are. Their fan base has resorted to on Twitter being their current pride point is we were the last team to beat Indiana the last time. They're marking stuff on Twitter. They have a little fake banner I saw last team to beat Indiana, whenever it was last year in the playoff.
That's funny. Howie, I want to get one of your thoughts on a non-Indiana moment from this year that stood out to you. I also know Eli had something else queued up he wanted to share.
Yeah, that's going to be hard. Just because my Saturdays were engrossed with the cream and crimson. But I think the other moment that I really like grabbed onto for me was what Eli already covered, was Ohio State, Michigan. Like as a Big Ten guy, as a um as a Big Ten fan, Big Ten Conference fan, I think like that matchup on Saturday at noon on Fox is always like must watch, must see TV every year. So that's probably the other moment. But I think to say something different, I think it's the fall of Penn State is the one thing this year that really stuck out to me. Of just like it went from bad to worse to worse than bad. Like, and it almost didn't make it like the first loss made sense. You're like, oh, okay. Second loss, it was like, what's going on? And then it just unraveled from there. Because again, before the year we talked about it, the preseason ranking was like, holy smokes. Like, is this the year that James Franklin finally gets it done? They have the talent. And then they have a cupcake first three games. But then you lose in overtime to Oregon, which was game day at home, like wide out. Like that's the whole Penn State experience, right? You lose that big game, but then UCLA they didn't have a head coach at that time. They fired their head coach, and they go into like they Penn State travels to UCLA and loses to a UCLA team that was in shambles.
They
But they
hadn't
UCLA
beat,
led
was
zero. They had
0
led
and 4.
No, they had
yeah,
led 0 seconds all season
all
going into
And
that
those
season.
were
game.
non-conference games too. Like a
Right,
UNLV team as well, I believe in there. Like
right.
madness.
Yeah. But then you think, okay, they're going to right the ship coming back home against Northwestern. No, they lose by one at home to Northwestern, who's another team that is not in a good spot. Like they're trying to build themselves back up, but they're not good at all. And then you have to go to Iowa and you lose by one at Iowa. Like very very like crippling losses for the Nittany Lions in this season. And I think that was the biggest takeaway is like just that fall and like, okay, we're parting ways with James Franklin in the middle of the
Yeah.
season and we're moving on.
And let me give you a lot of credit, Howie. In our one of our preseason episodes, you called it. And I remember sitting on here when Johnny used to be a part of this podcast more frequently. Haven't seen him in a bit. Shout out, but you looked at that and you were like, I think Penn State was preseason number 1 or 2. It was them in Texas. And we were just all kind of like, really? Is this justifiable? They do bring back a lot of guys. And you were like, there is no way Penn State does it. Okay, I wanted to bring out something that you shared that I thought was a theme of this season. And I want to hear your guys' thoughts before I kick over to Eli. Nico Iamaleava, right, became the villain overnight last offseason when he left. And then he wins that game with UCLA over Penn State. I felt like this season, more than any other season, there were so many villains turned heroes. And even a little bit of like Kurt Signetti, he got on the game day stand last season at Notre Dame on their turf and talked a lot of trash and loses and becomes a little bit of this villain. And Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt, a little bit of the villain story. And like, I just felt like a lot of people came around on some of these quote unquote villains and then they kind of like won people over. But before we dive deeper into that, Eli, I know you got to run soon, and you probably wanted to share some statistical things from your Ohio State defense this year.
Yeah. This was number one. I think the Ohio State defense this year was the best in America. And I think if like watching them on a week to week basis, that is a brick wall that is, I mean, more. It was so fun to watch. That defensive front was nasty with guys like Caden McDonald and Kenyatta Jackson. Caden Curry, an Indianapolis native, he was one of my favorite players to watch all year. But Arvell Reese, Jermaine Matthews, Davis Enigmanosa, and I haven't even got to the safeties, Caleb Downs. Like watching
Dog.
them, I don't think we're going to see an Ohio State defense that's that good for another like 10 years. And genuinely, I don't know if we're going to see another college football defense that's that good for another 5-ish years. Um, if they gave up 17 points in one game against Miami, but what we have to remember is two of those touchdowns. Number one is a pick six. Defense can't do anything about that. And number two is at the end of the game where they were letting Miami get into the end zone because that was just kind of the situation that they were in. It was Matt Patricia. There were a lot of questions surrounding him transitioning from the NFL to the college game, and he passed with flying colors. I absolutely can't wait to get him back this year. And then one more thing before I do, unfortunately, got to hop off and run. Uh, my out of school moment for the college football season is getting to be in the environments. I got the opportunity to go to Purdue twice. They played Ohio State and when they played Indiana. And the atmosphere in college football stadiums is just unlike any other in sports. Purdue, not a football school, but the way they brought, I mean, it was a packed house both times, albeit the red side was a lot more, but it's just so fun, and it's why we get to do things like this because college football truly is one of the best, and it's one of the best things in sports.
It's a great
Eli, you
point
nailed it.
because we're going to talk a lot about how broken the sport is in the off season, but Saturdays in the fall, man, they are still hmm, totally right.
Peak, peak. That's a great point for you to end on, Eli. Thanks so much for jumping in, man. We appreciate you.
Yeah, I'll see you guys soon. Thanks again for having me.
Yes, sir. We'll see you, Eli. And great point from Eli there. All of us got to enjoy different college football experiences and venues this year. Howie, a bucket list one at the Rose Bowl, not a college campus, but Reagan, I know you caught multiple games. I was able to check Arkansas off the list this year for that Notre Dame Arkansas game. So all of us got to experience on campus Saturday football games. Nothing better. Um, the funny thing about Matt Patricia is nobody was happy about that hire. So I love Eli's call there. Nobody was happy, and Jim Knowles was regarded as the best DC in the country coming off of last year, and Jack Sawyer and Caleb Downs and crew tore it up all year, and everyone thought there'd be a drop off. He goes to Penn State. What in the world? He's going to be at Tennessee next year. So just another one of those stories where Matt Patricia was the villain and what are we doing and all this noise at Ohio State, and their defense was elite, was phenomenal. So Eli with some great points there.
And you mentioned one that was villain turned hero and then immediately turned back into the biggest potential villain in the sport in Diego Pavia, where nobody over one season, I think, flipped his image in a good direction just to undo all of it in like 5 minutes at the end. And it's honestly unfortunate. It's an unfortunate, series of events because he tanked whatever little draft stock he had. Emphasis on the little at 5'9" 3/4. That coming out. So, I was a big Diego guy all season. You were too, Josh. And now I'm a little embarrassed to have said that I was rooting for him all year because he just, man, what a.
I think that the contrast between how he handled himself and how Fernando Mendoza handled himself showed a little bit of why Fernando Mendoza was selected to be the Heisman. And again, play on the field matters so much, but you got to remember it's a fraternity of former Heisman winners, and they're selecting a guy that they want to join that fraternity. We're talking about guys like Desmond Howard and Tim Tebow, who are huge media figureheads in the sport and also carry themselves to a level of character that they expect of Heismans who are going to represent the name Heisman. So, well said, Reagan. Great point there.
Yeah, just I agree with all that as well. And just if you look at, just the difference in the two camps that night of just like Mendoza wins it, goes and celebrates with the boys, all buttoned up, suit, tie, all of it. And then Pavia kind of, the turtleneck, the suit jacket, the, kind of it's all about me. It's all about me. If like I feel like a lot of our Heisman winners have had these great seasons and have a true like have given credit to the team, and they've been on these great, like incredible teams. I think Pavi is one of those guys that's a little bit more about himself, right? A little bit more about the name on the back of the jersey than the name on the front. And I think like Mendoza is that the pinnacle of like that team guy, and I think that's why he goes 1-1, and I think that's why the Raiders absolutely want him. I think that's why he's going to be a great person for that organization to kind of pull him out of the uh, pull him, I guess, start pulling him into this rebuild and start to rebuild that team because I mean, there's some decent like they
They've
have
got pieces.
Brock, yeah, they do. They have Brock Bowers. They have
Max
like
Crosby.
Genty. Like they have some pieces there. And if you can get a good quarterback, good team guy, and you can get a good locker room chemistry going on in there, like I know he's a goofy dude, but he's a dude's dude, and I know a guy who
Goofy can work in the NFL. Look,
right.
Go back to Philip Rivers, a goofy dude, one of the best. He's the best PG trash talker of all time, where he famously never swears, but he had what? I think he was like eighth most passing yards by the end of his career, including this year. I think Goofy can work if it's authentic. If just be authentically who you am. They've got some great pieces in Las Vegas. They need to flick Max Crosby into a high draft pick and work on that O line a little bit so Mendoza and Genty aren't, getting tackled in the backfield so much. But yeah,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, speaking of quarterbacks, I felt like this year overall was a down year for quarterbacks. We came into the year with a lot of very high expectations and a lot of guys that fell short. I think Trinidad Chambliss is one of the few exceptions of a guy that was totally off the radar and way exceeded expectations and performed at an insanely high level. But across the board, very tough year for quarterbacks, right, Reagan?
It was absolutely the year where the guys that were projected, like the top five quarterback rankings, almost unanimously had DJ Lagway and Cade Klubnik in them, and both of them fell apart. Transfer for Lagway, obviously Cade is termed out of his college eligibility, I think. Um, but you had guys like you mentioned, Trinidad Chambliss. You had Fernando Mendoza. Nobody really, I don't remember him being in any top tens going into the year, and obviously he was the best. You had a guy like Gunnar Stockton who was not a highly, and he ended up being a pretty high respect guy by the end of the year. So you obviously had
Lenora
Dante Moore.
Lenora Seller as well. Sellers.
Thank you. Yep. I'm just thinking of this off the fly, off the top, and totally, Lenore Sellers was also universally in that top 10. So it was really the year of the underdog.
And even guys like, honestly, like Ty Simpson and John Mateer, who started the year so well, and then obviously injuries kind of tanked those guys' trajectories. It was just a tough year for the quarterback position. I wanted to go with a team that I thought had a huge year and a historic college football program, the Oklahoma Sooners. I mean, Brent Venables was looking very shaky. They came into the year with the toughest strength of schedule in the country, maybe Florida. It was definitely top two, though. Florida and Oklahoma, the two toughest schedules in the country. And man, they navigated it. The fact that they found a way to get in the playoff. I know they wanted to win that home playoff game, but one of only 8 teams to host a home playoff game. They battled through injuries. They found a way. I mean, they had wins over Michigan, over Alabama, two other major historic programs, and they went through a gauntlet of a schedule and found a way to get there. I thought Oklahoma was one of the better stories this season for college football.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it'll be interesting to see what they do next year. Hopefully no injuries at the QB position. My last thought, and I want to see what you guys think, is there's been a couple of programs over the last decade where the big question has always been, are they back? Starting with Texas, obviously. Texas has been that team. Is Texas back? And then, a couple of years ago in their bowl win over Georgia, they say we're back, and then they kind of go back into a little bit of a lull. I think Texas is back. I don't think any of us really argue that they're back or not. They're going to be a consistent top 15 to 10 team. Miami, I think the U is back. I think that Cristobal has done a phenomenal job year over year stacking improvements. Now they're going to go into next year where they're losing both their defensive tackles or defensive ends. They're losing both of their offensive tackles. They're losing their quarterback, which that championship game. But I didn't get to do the breakdown with you guys. You got the good, the bad, and the ugly of Carson Beck. You saw all three in one phase. It was the most Carson Beck game of all time. You saw how talented he could be in the comeback in the third quarter. You saw in the first half how bad he can be, and then the worst, obviously, right there at the end. Either way, don't want to spin off. But is the U back in your guys' mind?
Yeah, I mean, obviously playing like watching them play my team, like they are violent in the way that they play, which is almost like it's scary, like lining up against dudes that have no problem like just burying you into the dirt, right? Like we watch a lot of college football and there are hits, where you go, oh, like that's big. I feel like there's very few teams that are violent, like absolutely just no regard for their body, certainly no regard for your body, and just violent, right? I kind of like watching the Colts play the Texans this year. The Texans defense is a violent defense. They will just murder you, no problem. So like I think that's a hard standard to have for a football program. That's a hard standard to establish. So I'd be interested to see like now that like Ruben Bain's gone, like one of the most violent dudes I've ever seen on a football field. Like, how does that translate to next year? And if their defense game one is just as violent next year, then you have me 100% sold that they're back. But I do think that there's also teams that kind of they load up right at the right time. You know, they're they have recruits that, you know, kind of develop into studs. You get a few transfers, and then you just go on this magical run. And then afterwards you go, where's our next Ruben Bain? Where's our next, you know, who's our next Carson Beck? Who's our next like who are these next guys? And then you try to say, well, we're bringing back this person, we're bringing back this person, and then you try to want to like sustain that. Like there's another team out there right now that's like a Miami that's like one or two pieces away. So how does Miami rebuild
Yeah,
that
how do they
and
reload
go?
and not be a window team?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
and I think that because they've been a top 10 recruiter consistently under Cristobal, and then they're also an excellent portal team. That's why I don't think Miami's going to be a window team. I think Miami's going to be a consistent reload. They already got what's his name? Damon Wilson, I believe, the defensive end out of Mizzou transferred in, top guy there. It's impressive. Honestly, it's just
yeah.
impressive what he's been able
The
to do.
the mid
Yeah.
CC definitely helps their case as well. Of like you're not I mean, you don't have to deal with, Florida and Alabama and Oklahoma and Texas and Georgia every week. Like you're playing, Clemson team that hasn't figured out the portal thing yet and has
Right.
had like you're playing those type of teams. Louisville that's, kind of they can shock you, but also like they're just not they haven't gotten
Here's
even close to getting over the hump.
Now they just
here's
need to
the
win their first mid-CC title.
right. That's what's
Exactly.
crazy.
Right.
Miami has not won an ACC title, which is just insane to think about. But also to the same point, and correct me if I'm wrong, just off the top of my head, they're the only ACC or Big 12 team in the last 2 years, the two 12-team playoff era years, to have multiple wins over SEC and Big 10 conference members. I can't think of another ACC or Big 12 conference member that has won multiple games over Big Ten and SEC opponents. And I think that's incredibly impressive.
Maybe Ohio State last year. I'm trying to think. They beat Tennessee. They beat
No, no,
Oregon.
but Ohio State's a Big Ten team. I'm
Oh,
saying
okay.
Big 12 or ACC, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think that the way that Texas Tech and Miami are building right now is very similar. But Texas Tech hasn't even played an SEC or a Big Ten team until Oregon, and they got blanked. And I think like you look at the portal, and Miami and Texas Tech are dominating defensive line and defensive end recruits. So they're building to be those like tough physical style Big Ten SEC style programs. But man, the fact that Miami got it done this year and went on that run is so impressive to me. The identity of Mario Cristobal is just seen all over that team. You guys nailed that, Howie and Reagan. Like they're a tough, nasty, physical team. I would go so far as to say Corey Heatherman, their defensive coordinator hire, was the greatest coordinator hire of the 2025 cycle. He made such a difference for that team because they've always had dudes, but last year their defense was terrible. Cam Ward just out was in a shootout every week and outshot everybody. But man, their defense this year was nasty. They were elite.
Imagine this year's defense with Miami, last year's offense with, like you said, with Mr. Ward.
Would have been
Right.
special.
And I think I just looked at their schedule, and their schedule is very favorable for them to. I mean, the last 3 weeks of the season with a bye in there, they're at home against Duke, Virginia Tech, and Boston College to end the season. Like, there's a very good chance that like those three home games boost them, like get them into the ACC championship, and then boost them into the college football playoff again. As a higher seed, and who knows where they go from there.
I think another fun one is just as a season highlight is Miami would be included in this group. We've already talked about Ole Miss as well, but also Alabama. Last year, those three teams, the first three teams out of the playoff, and this year, all three of them taking steps, improving and getting in the playoff. Obviously, Miami of those three going all the way to the championship, but man, a lot of credit to all three of those programs for feeling like they got snubbed. I didn't think any of them deserved to be in. Maybe one of the three over SMU, but that was just a personal opinion. But the fact that all of them improved, got in the playoff, and all of them won a game, Ole Miss winning multiple games, Miami winning 3 games, going to the net, like a lot of credit to all three of those schools for doing that, and a really cool storyline. And it's fun because I gave you credit, Howie, for the Penn State call preseason, but my question about Miami was, okay, They figured out this transfer quarterback thing. Third year in a row where they're getting a guy, plug and play, a lot of talent. But they hired this Minnesota DC, Corey Heatherman. What's the defense going to look like? And man, they answered the call and made a heck of a run.
Yeah, and they
Uh,
weren't quarter. Go ahead, Howie. Run.
yeah, I think talking about the college football playoff, like we still have only one team that has had the bye and has won. And so, like, I think that's a real, like, continuing to take steps and just getting in is a huge thing for a college football program, is like just getting in and finding a way. You don't necessarily, right now, I wouldn't want a 1 through 4 seed. Like, I don't want to be the SEC champion. I don't want to be the Big Ten champion I mean, I do. Yes, I do as an IU fan because we can handle it, obviously. But like, I don't want to be a 4 seed and have to like have the
Yeah,
5 way. I don't want to. I don't want that.
that's a really, honestly, I'd love to do a separate segment on this and break it down a little more because you guys know I've been the guy that sat there last year and said, well, if you look at the individual matchups, it wasn't the reason or anything like that. Obviously, you get new data points, you have to reevaluate. And if you go matchup by matchup over the three losses versus the one win, obviously that Alabama team was just super cooked by the end after the Georgia game. They played a team that was just not able to score, and so it was a great win. But then obviously Indiana just boat races. If you go game by game, and I'd love to do this separately, I don't know that that's why Texas Tech lost. I definitely think that that plays into why they got boat raced. If I don't believe that that's the reason why Georgia lost because Georgia started hot and then ended cool and then Ole Miss caught fire in the second half. So yeah, and then Ohio State, I do think that that extra rest and that extra rust, I think that that is the reason they lost because they were atrocious in the first quarter, got down 14, game over. Game over. They actually outscored Miami the remaining 3 quarters. Didn't matter. Game was over. Miami took it and like a boa constrictor just strangled the life out of them. So very
And
interesting.
and when you haven't played in so long, and then you play a violent team like Miami, like that, those first few hits you are not ready for because that's not you are not hitting like that in practice.
That's a great
Yeah.
point, Howie. And Reagan, great thoughts of like listeners and viewers, like this is the stuff we're going to get into with these off-season episodes because there's a lot there. There's a lot of meat on the bone of things that need to improve or ideas we have and all that kind of stuff. And definitely the rest period and calendar at the end of the season is probably the biggest thing that needs to change because again, and I say this with all respect, Howie, because it was your Indiana Hoosiers that won it, but by the end of the season, I was so fatigued because this season is way too long. And here's the problem with that. In the NBA and the NHL, people always say there's 2 seasons. There's the regular season and there's the playoffs. And that's because they let half the league into the playoffs and they play 7 round series from the jump. So it literally is a second season. Like, I think the Panthers have won the last 2 years and they've played an additional like 50
In
games
in their
versus the rest
last
of this.
3 years that they've gone, because remember they lost Vegas the first
Yeah,
time. Those 3 seasons, I've added it up. They've played an entire extra season in 3 years. They've played 4 seasons of hockey in 3 years.
which is just insane. And then this is easy math, but you look at Indiana this year, who played in the Big Ten championship game and then played 3 additional playoff games. Miami, they didn't play in the AC championship, but they played 4 additional playoff games. Dude, everyone else has been sitting at home for 2 months. The transfer portal is going crazy. So the fatigue, I'm like really hopeful that we can change the calendar because next year, the national championship is even a week later,
The
which is just
25th, I
so
believe.
frustrating. And I think about, you mentioned Howie, college basketball. I mean, I'm just now getting into college basketball and like we're a month away from March. So it's just, the calendar has to change. It's way too long of a season. It's way too long to keep the attention span of fans, and college football players deserve better. So, you guys feel like
Yeah,
that's a good place to end?
I do, and I think that the numbers reflect the fatigue, where the numbers that were not the national championship in the playoff were lower than last year's, which were lower than the 4 team. So the championship, Miami, Indiana, I think peaked at like 32 million and like averaged 30 million, which is a very good number, the best number, and I think about 10 years. I don't off the top of my head, but I think all the other non-championship games, you see the fatigue in fans, their eyeballs. They're not watching as much.
100%. And a lot of the people who are watching aren't college football diehards who care about the regular season. They're just jumping in at the end. Let me close with one really fun thought. This was one of the best national championship games we've had in years. If you look at the box score of last year, it made the game look a lot closer than it was. But Notre Dame, man, give them a lot of credit. They battled, but they were never really in it after that first drive. Man, which shout out, that drive was tough as nails. But this was one of the best national championship games in a decade. Honestly, since we had those close matchups with Alabama and Clemson, and even one of the Georgia years. But
Yeah.
that was a great game. When Indiana blocked the punt, I thought it was over, but to see Miami still fight, still rally, and stay in it, it was a phenomenal way to end the season. A great national championship game.
Yeah, if you take the Notre Dame again, they battled back once it was pretty much over. If you don't take that as they got within one score, this was the first one score fourth quarter game in the national championship since the Georgia Bama 2021 national championship. And then before that, like you said, you'd have to go past Bama, past LSU, back to some of like you had the 2017 one that went to OT, and then those two classic Bama versus Clemson years. Totally agree. It was a great game.
It was a great game.
Yeah,
Howie,
I
why don't
wish
you
it.
close us out, bro?
I would have been okay with 3, 4, 5 score game for my heart rate, but no, yeah, what a great game, and just that's what you want out of a we've all. I mean, think about some of the legendary like Super Bowl moments in these one score games. The helmet catch and Edelman catching it, basically like keeping it from hitting the ground with one arm against the Falcons, like on a huge comeback. Like we want those moments, and we want those moments in championship games, and to have like the Mendoza QB draw moment in that game that's everything you could ask for as a sports fan out of a championship game. And as an IU fan, that moment will live on in my head forever and a day. So, yeah, what a great college football season. There's obviously a lot of things that we would like to change in the overall landscape, but there is nothing I'd like to change about this season.
Well said, Howie. Good way to wrap it up. Well, Reagan, Howie, and Eli's already gone. Thank you guys, man, for jumping on. And thank you two for specifically for being awesome contributors this year to wrapping up our third year of the LCFP. But this was our best year yet and the most fun I've had doing it with you guys. So huge props to you guys, man. Thank you so much.
Always glad to be on.
Yeah, thank you, Laner, and I really appreciate your heart and your passion for good, clean, family friendly college football, just knowledge and experience and content. And it's been a lot of fun being along this ride with you.
Thanks, fellas.
The best content's yet to come. We're gonna be grinding this year.
That's
We're gonna
right.
be grinding this year, man.
That's right. It's going to be a blast. So, everybody watching and listening, man, thank you guys so much. And once again, thanks to our partners, Duck Buck. Our partnership is extending into the off season, boys. So, that's big news. We're fired up about it. But, man, thanks again. Heck of a season. This is Laner signing off.